And now, your friend in the real estate business, John Adamson.
Hi folks, welcome to Property Line Today. I'm John Adamson. I'm a licensed real estate broker. I run the Realty Center team at Realty Management Associates, and I've been the host on Property Line for well over 20 years. Wow. My co-host, who's been on many times and on both radio and TV, my good friend Paul Anderson. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do and where you're at?
I just sell money, John. Actually, good evening, everybody. Paul Anderson. I'm with Eagle Home Mortgage down in Eagle, Idaho. You know, I've been in the lending business now longer than I would like. Been through this last recession, but going on about 13 years now.
And Eagle Home Loans, it sounds like it's named after the town of Eagle, but Eagle...
It does. It works. It works.
It works out because it is a national company.
Right.
We're
owned by a publicly traded company, and we're actually owned by a home builder called Lennar Homes, which is about the third largest home builder in the country.
Right.
So even though they don't build here in the valley, that's who owns us and backs us. But
I've done business with Eagle for a long time. Since they're national, they have competitive rates, but everyone there's local, like Paul. And
we do everything
in-house that we require.
Like I say, cradle to grave, so start to finish in-house. So everything from
the loan origination, the processing, underwriting, all done in Eagle, Idaho.
Doc drawing and funding, everything happens out of that office. So it's wonderful.
I'm glad you could be here. And you know, the show is a show where we answer questions on buying, selling, or investing. It's not too late to get a question in. You can go to the phone and call us at 830-2557. Or you can get on the internet and go to www.propertylinetoday.net. When the screen comes up on the right-hand side, it says Ask a Question. Just click that, type in your question, and we'll get it answered on the show. We always like to start with just some news that you can use if you're getting ready to buy or put your house on the market, or maybe you've decided you want to try having some real estate in your portfolio, for an investment. So one of the first stories that I pulled was headlined, "Home Buyers Have a Spring in Their Step." And basically it's a story that talks about a survey, mortgage applications up for the fourth week. And the Mortgage Bankers Association tracked all of March. So during all of March, they went up, the applications rose from anywhere from 4.6% to 9.6%. Are you seeing this over at Eagle?
Oh, we're seeing it all over the valley. It's funny. I was talking to one of my peers the other day, and we were talking, and I think she said it best. She's been lending almost 30 years now, and she said people are in the mood again. It's amazing. Consumer confidence is up. I mean, we're seeing, since I've been here last, and when I was here last, the economy was starting to pick up, but things have really gotten going. The housing market's really good. Interest rates have remained low, artificially low, but they're
very
low. The fact is today they're low.
Now last year, we started off the year a little slow, but then every month the sales prices just went up, up, up. And in April, we hit our high point for the year. We were up over 12% from the year prior, last April.
Right.
And then the market just started falling off, and we ended up the year not quite having home prices go up 6%. So we lost a lot of that April gain.
Right.
How do you feel about the market? Now, we didn't have this huge jump, first quarter. It's been growing steadily. It looks like we're going to have another 5-6% growth this year. Do you think that we'll just continue growing this year, or do you think we might have a letdown after the busy spring?
I think we'll level off a little bit, maybe, and typically we see that usually in August. Kind of slows down a little bit. People have settled in, people who are relocating, they're getting the kids back to school, they're done with the vacation, it slows down. But, compared to the last couple of years where we kind of went on that rocket ship again and we shot straight up, the 5 to 6% as we've seen historically is healthy.
Very healthy.
And it's sustainable. And that's the thing, I'm more of the tortoise to the hare. For years, we had 22 years of 4 to 7% appreciation. That was predictable, that was sustainable, and we could handle it. Is when we took off and we went straight up that we blew it up.
Well, typically after recession, if home prices go down within a few years, they're right back up to where they were. And we have seen that in some of the subcategories. Right. We still have some room to grow to be where we were in 2008. So I think people were hoping that we'd have, double-digit appreciation.
Right.
And we did for the first quarter of last year. But now we're just going to have this sustainable
Steady.
4 to 7% a year is your opinion on that.
Well, I think so, and to be honest with you, it's healthy. That double-digit appreciation, while it sounds neat, it can lead us to trouble again. And rather than go through what we just went through all over again, let's play it safe this time.
Now, the home buyers, we've talked a lot about the millennials. They start their search on the computer. They go and find the home before they even know what kind of loan they're going to get. Since you're having, every week the number of people going in to apply for home mortgages, do they already have a home in hand, or are they doing it the right way, getting pre-approved, finding out what's the best loan, how much are they going to need, what are they going to qualify, then start their search?
Probably more often than not, they're out looking at the home first. We were talking about that the other day, and no offense to this, but our industry is somewhat backwards. People go find the home they want, then they try to figure out how to pay for it.
Right.
Me being more conservative by nature, I would like to know how to pay for something and how much I can afford before I go out shopping. And so while we were on break, I got a call from a friend of mine who's an agent. She said, "Hey, I've got a client. Here's what he's thinking about. Can you see if he can get pre-qualified?" And I said, "I'll call him after the show." So, we're seeing more and more because there's so much marketing. I mean, right now, buildings going extremely strong, real estate strong. So there's so much house marketing out there. People may fall in love with a house before they know what they qualify for.
Well, I noticed I was looking over some of the questions that have already come in that we're going to answer, and one of them, he was so surprised that there were closing costs. Like, he didn't know that there was closing costs. He had I think it says 3% down when we get the question, but no one told him about closing costs. And if he would have gone in with his agent to the lender and got pre-approved, one, he would have known there were closing costs,
Right.
but then two, his agent would have been able to negotiate the seller paying some of those closing costs. He goes out, finds the house, and now he's got his 3%, but finds out he's going to need that much more just in closing costs. So it is important if you're going out, don't go apply for your loan after you found the house. Go ahead and get your loan approved, then go out and find the house, and you'll be far better off.
Well, then you can write a better offer. You know what you can afford, where you're comfortable. As I always say, your payment comfort. To me, I said, to me, it's not as important how much you qualify for as how much are you comfortable paying for. Because every 30 days, your mortgage gets real. You got to sit down and write a check or go on the computer. And I want that to be a pleasant experience for you.
Sure.
I don't want it to be something that's going to cause you a lot of grief.
Now, come the end of April last year, home values had shot up over 12%. By the end of first quarter here, home prices are up about 4.6%. And nationwide, it's right around that, not just under 5% property value increase. Some places are just skyrocketing. Denver right now has the highest appreciation. And
That's interesting because we're kind of like a little brother market to Denver. So
yeah, I've always tell people that, boys, I like to track Denver because Denver's a kind of a leading indicator. What's going on in Denver, a lot of times we see just a few months later here in Boise.
Right.
And they're at nearly 9% for the year, making it the highest overall home price appreciation. Rents are up nearly 20%. So, I mean, to find a place to rent in Denver is very spendy. But we're not seeing home prices go up. We're seeing rents nationwide go up as well. In fact, the increase in rent prices is about double to what home price increases are right now.
that should tell you something.
So, and when you read the Nationals are pretty darn close to what's happening right now in Boise. New homes, article came out, said new home sales spike 7.8% in February. They still look like they're going strong. Not nearly strong enough to make up for the demand, but it's the highest sales pace for new homes since February of 2008. So, you know, the new homes are taking off and they're getting their prices too.
Yeah, new construction is leading the market in price appreciation.
Fed sets stage for rate hikes. You know, they just changed a few words that they were using, and all these articles hit the internet. Fed is going to be raising interest rates. Now, on last week's show, we talked about what the economists were saying, and And there wasn't a single economist that thought that we'd see rates increase in April. There was a small fraction that thought we might see some increases by August. Most of them thought we wouldn't see an increase till fourth quarter or spring of next year. What's your feeling on that?
You know, we've been down this road with them so many times. It's kind of the carrot and the stick thing. But it was interesting. So when they came out at the open committee meeting and announced that, you know, unemployment rates have dropped, we're starting to see positive growth in other sectors of the economy. So we're going to have some patience.
Yeah, that was the word, patience.
And it's all semantics, but the markets didn't like it. The markets took...
They thought that when the Fed said patience, that means we're out of patience and we're going to be raising rates.
And so, it's interesting to see how, in my mind, that, you know, major investors and stuff can manipulate the markets, because all of a sudden the markets drop. And what have interest rates done the last 2 weeks? They've gone down.
Well, yeah, and it was kind of, and again, I know that the people at the Real Pro Foundation that, you know, give us our numbers for the Property Line show, right after the first of the year, mortgage rates went below 4%. In fact, they got as low as 3.5% for a 30-year mortgage. We were shocked. We never thought in a million years we would ever see 3.5% again. And it didn't last very long, and it started moving upward. But now they're inching back down to below 4%.
You know, it's the funny, I guess it's the never say never, because every time you go, it can't get any better. But here's going to be the reality of it. At some point in time, it's going to snap. The rubber band's going to snap. It's going to go the other way, and all the people that were trying to time it are going to miss it.
Now, we've had 6 weeks of increases, major increases in the number of people applying for home mortgages. I mean, if I ran a store, you said that's what you do, you sell money, and I had a line out my door, people
Cost of
wanting
money's
my
going to
money.
go up.
Don't you think that's a good indicator that
Supply,
rates are
demand.
going up?
So, you know, if it stays like this, why shouldn't they? It's natural. To be honest, these rates right now, while they're great for home buyers, they're hurting other sectors of the economy. You look at our seniors over the last 7 or 8 years who were more conservative, who a lot of their incomes derive from interest income. They're not making any return on their money. They've been severely impacted by this. So rates going up is not the worst thing in the world.
No, not at all. The last thing before we take a break and go in and answer our questions is Remodeling Magazine. And a lot of different people do this. The Realtors Association, different magazines, they put together these surveys showing what remodeling projects will give you the greatest bang for the buck, or will return most of your cash if you're trying to sell. And it was a pretty good one. Right now, they're saying if you're willing to spend between $5,000 and $25,000, that's the kind of the mid-range for home improvements. They're finding that to get the highest return, you should be looking at minor kitchen remodeling, fresh paint, new flooring, new countertops, new doors, fresh paint. And you'll get on those items almost 100% of what you spend back. If on the upper remodels, 25,000 to 100,000, they're saying finish off an attic, finish off a basement. Decks still bring in a good return as long as you don't go, you know, crazy. They say, you know, decks under $10,000 seem to have a good, healthy return. Want to mention that our show here on Treasure Valley Community TV, that Treasure Valley Community TV is the media sponsor and the nonprofit sponsor for Homes for Idaho Heroes. And if you're a veteran, a teacher, a firefighter, or a policeman, and you take advantage of this Homes for Heroes, after you close, you'll be getting a cash gift that you can use any way you want to help move, take a vacation, pay down some bills at closing. The minimum gift's $1,000. I know that we have a beautiful 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 3-car garage home in Cuna that's on the program right now. It's about $180,000, and that one has a $3,500 gift.
Great.
So that's a nice thank you. I saw a real nice little entry-level home over off of Mitchell between Fairview and Eagle, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath family room that under the Homes for Heroes program, they're going to get a $1,500 gift.
Great.
So if nothing else, that might be a couple Christmases that they're not going to have to make a house payment.
Well, that's a great way to honor and thank people who've served our country.
And I'm glad to be a part of the program too. And remember, if you have a home to sell, Treasure Valley Community TV, through their Idaho Open Media, the instructors here at the TV station are providing really high quality videos that can be used on your listings. They're very affordable, and you really can't expect nowadays your realtor to have a copywriter, a sound man, a cinematographer, and an editor. And it's like getting a home inspection. You're going to want to hire a professional.
Not without it costing you a lot.
And you might want to consider calling TVC TV. I have, and I found their work to be really good and affordable too. We're going to take a little break, and when we get back, we're going to answer the questions that you've sent us at www.propertylinetoday.net or call in at 830-2557. Paul and I will be right back. The Homes for Idaho Heroes program. If you're a veteran, a fireman, this home can be purchased with zero down. The seller will pay all of the closing costs. Never has to be paid back. Gift for your service. Well, folks, as you know, this is the part of the show that I just love the best, and why we do Property Line Today is answering the questions that you have on buying, selling, or investing in real estate. Taking the time to go to propertylinetoday.net, hit ask a question, send them to us, or called in during the show at 830-2557. Got some really good questions, Paul. You want to start with the first one?
Absolutely. This is the part I missed the most, so it's probably why I'm back. I love this part of it. So our first question today comes from Michael, and Michael asked, when you're reading economic news about real estate, how does Idaho or even Boise compare to the national averages on price, days on the market, etc.? Do you have to make adjustments? What about regional numbers? Is Boise comparable to numbers shown for the Western U.S.?
Michael, I work with the economists with the Real Pro Foundation that put on this show. Each month we do our best buy numbers. We've done that for years. And we do a little bit of news at the start of the show where we talk about the national. And I have found, probably since this millennium started in 2000, that Boise is pretty much mid-America. If you see a national average, we're going to be pretty darn close when it comes to existing homes, new homes. Time on the market is very similar. Rates are pretty much nationwide. Boise's, we're that breadbasket. We're that perfect town that matches, hometown America. But when you look, sometimes they'll break it out. They'll have the West, the South, the Midwest, the East. If you're looking at just like the Western numbers, we tend to be low. I've often said that if you look at the West, there's only a couple cities with cheaper homes than Boise, and that would be like Butte, Montana, Cheyenne, Wyoming. But nearly always, Reno is above us, Las Vegas is above us, Spokane, Seattle, Portland, all of California. So when you look at Western numbers, we're going to be at the bottom of those numbers.
Well, especially, John, when you dial that down even further, because then a lot of people start comparing us to the Pacific Northwest. And if you're talking about the Pacific Northwest compared to other major metropolitan cities, your Seattles, your Portland, obviously our cost of living is significantly lower and our housing is much more affordable.
And Boise's not the highest if you're looking like at state numbers.
No.
If they release them as a whole, Boise's pretty darn close to Idaho. But northern Idaho's more expensive. Sun Valley's more expensive. But again, you're going to have Twin Falls versus Boise. Most of the time, Twin Falls numbers are higher than Boise's numbers. So it's a good question, Michael. I appreciate you asking. The next question comes in from Pam. She says, the tiny house movement, what's all the hype?
Well, that's gotten a lot of activity on the news in the last couple of weeks.
Made some really good TV shows on it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I need to learn more about it. I mean, I did read some more on it, and then there was a little bit of a newscast on it this week. But, it's an interesting concept. Like anything, though, it'll be I'll be curious to see how they figure out all the logistics of it, because are you gonna make it a permanent dwelling and attach it to something, and now will it be taxed as real property? Where are you
They all
gonna-
look like mobile homes or travel trailers to me. I don't know. I think probably,
Yeah, the one I saw the other day that they were showing, I want to say it was on Channel 2, it was 89 or 95 square feet.
yeah, I haven't seen it quite that small, but you know, they do have a news show on A&E or whatever, where they're not cheap. I mean, some of these tiny homes in the Hamptons and on the shores and vacation areas, their tiny little homes are $100,000 to $200,000.
Right.
I think the interest in the tiny house nation is people wanting to be cheap. I think this millennial generation that we always talk about, well educated, hasn't bought homes yet. I think they saw their parents, grandparents go through hell during the last Great Recession. Work's not steady. They've seen their parents and kind of strapped to a home mortgage, and they want to be a little freer. They have student debt that has to be paid off. And I think they're thinking, do I really need a house that has 2 bedrooms that I never sleep in? Or a family room, a living room and a family room, and we spend all the time in the family room.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, because now all of a sudden you've got zoning, you've got a zone for this, you've got to get the density.
Well, you can't finance them, so people are having to pay cash, I would think, for most of these. So, you know, it would actually require less cash just to go out and buy a regular home.
Right.
Will they appreciate it? I doubt it.
How are you going to appraise them?
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't get a loan on them if you wanted. They're not going to go up in value. I don't think, if you could get a loan, I don't think the interest on a tiny home, if it's built on a carriage like a trailer, is going to have any tax advantages.
Well, if it's not fixed, you're not going to land on
You know,
it.
I think what they're thinking is, I can get by, I want to be they think all the good things about having more money, but they don't know all the good things about owning a home. That they go up in value, that you don't have to pay cash, there's finance available for them. You get tax advantages. And they're not weighing that into the equation. I think there's going to be a lot of disappointed people. I really do.
Well, it's interesting because it is, you know, and the article I saw the other day was actually more of a concept to help deal with homelessness and displaced people, you know, creating tiny house communities. I think obviously the logistics of that, finding the location, being able to secure it, how do you come up with the funds to build it? How do you tax it? How do you tie into services? I think that'll be really interesting. I'll be curious to follow it.
I would rather see people like build a shop with a studio in it, or maybe build over the garage and add a studio apartment, finish off a basement into an apartment, different things like that that's going to give them appreciation, be able to finance it, have some tax advantages, than just, you know, getting us all living in little tiny travel trailers. They're not even modular or mobile homes. They're basically travel trailers.
Well, and at some point in time too, that brings up a whole other side of it. So you got to figure out how to deal with it on the front end. What about the back end? When you come time to sell it, what's the market for that? How do you sell it?
I doubt if there would be
Be fun
much
to
of
watch.
a market. Yeah.
Be fun to watch.
Alrighty, so that's the story on the tiny homes, Pam. You want to do the next one?
Yep. So our next question is a great question. It comes from Dimitri. And Dimitri asks, can I borrow on my 401k for the down payment on a rental unit? The funds allow me to borrow up to $50,000 at prime rate plus 1%, which is just under 5%. If paid back within 5 years, there is not a tax penalty.
Well, Dimitri pretty well has the rules down pat.
Dimitri, you pretty much answered your
Yeah.
own question within the question. So
And we have a lot of people that look at their 401k and they want to be diversified. And they have, you know, a percentage in different kinds of stocks. They'll have some in other financial instruments, but they don't have any real estate. And one of the ways that they can, you know, do that is a self-directed approach. They can do that with their 401k as the owner, and there's some advantages, but there's also some disadvantages. So some people think, you know, I'd like to keep it out of my 401k. Maybe they are only going to own it 5 years. You know, maybe it's a fix and flip type arrangement. And we see people doing this. Now, if you're a first-time home buyer, you can take the money out of your IRA for the down payment, and there's no tax penalty. But lenders, if somebody wants to buy a rental unit or even a house, if they can pay their IRA back in 5 years. You don't care if they use the money for a down payment.
They can utilize it, like I said, if you don't pay it back within the 5 years, obviously there's some potential tax consequences. So it's understanding how to structure it and how to do it. But we both worked with people to do that. And then there's also lenders who deal with non-recourse loans based on utilizing your self-directed IRA. Obviously, those require more money down.
Right.
But there's a
And
lot of
we're
programs out
seeing
there.
more and more people who will carry the paper on a non-recourse basis if the investor can put a large sum down.
It's all
So-
risk.
But Dimitri, you answered your own question. Yes, you can borrow from your 401k. A lot of them, you get to set the interest rate. You don't have to make monthly payments. They just want to see it paid back with interest in the 5-year period. And I have had clients in the past do this, and it's been financially rewarding. So
agree.
it's a good tool. Let's see, the next one I think is Pam. I don't know if it's the same Pam or not. It's kind of a common name. Pam says, is your social media interaction bringing in more or less than it did a year ago? I know both of you do Facebook, and the leads I was getting has really slowed down. I have Facebook. I don't Twitter. I know you Twitter. I do LinkedIn. I'm still kind of in the email generation. I never really have got a lot of referrals from social media. I do it primarily to communicate with my friends and clients. Do you actually get business off the social media that you do?
You know, I do. Like Pam said, I think one of the things to think about, Pam, and you specifically mentioned Facebook in here, just like Google is always changing their search algorithms and stuff like that, Facebook is constantly updating. And I think now that where Facebook is being more driven by advertising revenue, and now that they're a publicly traded company and there's pressure to create more revenue, they're constantly ratcheting things down. So a lot of the benefits you get for free now become kind of a paid feature. I know people, I met with a consultant 2 weeks ago who came into the office, and he was speaking about geo-targeted Facebook advertising. And you know, in today's electronic world, it's amazing the data that you can get access to on there. And he was showing us how you can go in on the back end and you can create marketing and advertising campaigns that are very, very inexpensive.
I think the old just putting it on Facebook and having people pick up the phone and call you.
Not so much.
You know, when it was new and fresh,
Yeah.
I thought it would bring in business. I know here at Treasure Valley Community TV, they're Idaho Open Media. They're doing the videos for property videos for homeowners and agents for their listings and their internet search portals, that kind of thing. They're doing the virtual renditions. But I know Idaho Open Media, they've expanded their idea beyond videos and television to encompass social media. It's part of like radio and television. And I know that the instructors, the volunteers here that instruct their classes are actually putting together services for the Boise community to teach people like Pam who want to do their Facebook or their LinkedIn better, how to do it. And I've listened to some of the conversations with people that they're helping here in the community. Right. And I didn't realize that you could, there was ways that you could like maybe target everyone who was interested in having a facelift.
Yep.
You know, well, you build your campaign around interested people. Yeah. And the things you were talking about, it's much more than just search engine optimization or getting the keywords people are looking for. It's really become a science. Mm-hmm. And Pam, if this is something, you know, email Treasure Valley Community TV. It's tvboise.org, and they'll have classes, and even some of the instructors here are taking on assignments to help local businesses, you know, bring in more clientele.
I think it's a very viable and cost-effective marketing channel, and that's why I do it. But it's understanding how to do it correctly. It used to be you could just kind of shotgun everything out there and post it, and more people would see what's on your feed. They've kind of changed that a little bit. So you just have to understand how to change with the times and adapt to it.
Well, you know, in the olden days, one of the main reasons people went to realtors is because they advertised the property. They were the number one client of the local newspaper. They'd have page after page of property listings. They would be the ones who would pay to have the colored posters done. They would pay to have the sign put on the property. Well, you know, as media has changed, you know, to be an effective realtor, and market property, you not only have to know how to write a nice written ad, you need to be able to produce a video. You have to be able to use all these different social medias correctly.
It's changed a
It's
lot.
changed.
Yep.
So you do have to know how to do it. I know one of the stories at the front, when they talked about a good real estate team today should have a millennial on the team to make sure that they're
can connect.
communicating and getting the message out the way that the younger generation wants to receive the message. So it truly is mass communication.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So
So our next question comes from James. James writes and said, "Is there such a thing as a probate specialist in the real estate industry? I am the personal representative for my mother's home, and I've gotten calls from realtor probate specialists about selling mom's house. How are they any different than the agent I bought mine through?"
James, I have several designations offered through the National Association of Realtors, and I am not familiar with a probate specialist. Now, there's all sorts of things that aren't through the National Association of Realtors. There's like the National Association of Trusted Advisors. I'm a Glenn Beck, Glenn Beck on
Right.
the radio. I'm one of Glenn Beck's agents I trust.
Right.
I think Dave Ramsey, I'm being vetted right now to be one of Dave Ramsey's practitioners that he recommends. So there's a lot of different ways. Short sales. I mean, there's probably 10 different short sale designations. One, all you have to do is take a short sale listing. The other one requires quite a bit of training.
Sure.
So I'm thinking, I'm not sure on this. I know there's a special designation for seniors. And there might be a subcategory if you have that senior designation working with seniors
Right.
that maybe goes over probate, and you might have a little bit more knowledge than the typical realtor. But it could also just be somebody that found a little niche market, like I specialize in government and bank repossessed homes. They may be going after that probate market. They understand it. Maybe they track death notices. I don't know.
Well, so in this case, how would you, just based on your experience, I mean, you've got over 30 years in the real estate industry, how would you treat a listing for a property in probate differently than you would a regular listing?
Oh, it would be different because, normally in probate, well, the seller's dead,
Sure.
so you're dealing with the kids. There's a lot of emotions.
Right.
You're going to have some people that are going to want to keep the family homestead. You're going to want others that don't need the cash. They would maybe want to carry the paper and get his income coming in, or donate a portion
But
and
as far
make
as just
mom and
actually
dad.
listing and marketing the property, would you do that differently than you would a standard listing?
Well, it might. They might want their money really fast, and they might either price it aggressively or offer more incentives to the buyers.
Right.
But the actual, listing it and doing what I would do to normally sell it wouldn't be any different.
And that, I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. I mean, that would be no different than if somebody came to you whose property wasn't in probate and said, "Hey, we need to sell really quick." All right, then we need to price it to sell. So, I mean, I'm trying to figure out here. I mean, when you hear things about this and, people who.
Well, it's like people call up and say, "I noticed your home didn't sell. Could I help you?"
Right.
I'm a homes that didn't sell specialist. It's really what they're doing. They're going through all the expired listings, trying to increase their business.
Right. Well, being conservative and cautious, I just wonder if somebody's going through the death notices and does some research and reaches out to you. I would vet them. I would vet them very seriously.
In today's market, we were talking about, how social media is media. And if I had come up with this idea 20 years ago, I would be cutting the obituaries out of the paper and going to my reverse directory trying to find, names
Track
and
stuff
address,
down.
track it down. But I'm sure that there's a way now that you could data mine in
Probably.
social media and say, give me every person who's the personal representative of a homeowner in the Boise area, and you could probably get a list with emails and phone numbers and names, and just by knowing how to do that might make you a probate specialist.
I'd like to see the designation first. Send me your credentials.
But it's a good question.
Great question.
So let's see, the next one's mine, isn't it? It's
Yes.
from Penny. Thank you, Penny, for going to propertylinetoday.net and hitting ask a question. Penny says, what's the purpose of an appraisal? Is it always paid by seller? And if so, why can't it be paid at closing with the other fees? I thought the appraisal was needed for some types of loans and not others. Isn't this fee a buyer's closing cost since it's needed to get them the loan they want? First of all, your first question, Penny, was an appraisal. I'm a certified general appraiser. My license is in Colorado, but it's a national designation. And, there's different types of appraisals. Most of the appraisals are to determine the fair market value. And if a person's borrowing money, the appraisal isn't so much for the buyer or seller, it is for the lender to justify that there's enough collateral to make the loan.
Correct.
They don't want to make 100% loans. They make FHA loans with 3.5% or other loans that require 5% or 20%. They want to know if that ratio is there.
Right.
So, and that's why if you buy it at one price and it appraises for another price, they're going to take the less of those two values because they want to make sure that if it's a 75-25 loan, that there's enough equity that the loan comes out, 75%.
The appraisal is going to determine so much. I mean,
But it is primarily to get a loan.
absolutely.
I ran into a situation this past week. Now, I'll tell Penny that if you were to go and ask all the escrow officers in the Boise area, what's the percentage of sellers paying for the appraisal versus the buyer paying the appraisal, I'm thinking here locally, it's about 90% or more that the seller pays for the appraisal.
It's pretty significant.
But you can go to other parts of here in Idaho where it's just the opposite. 90% of the time the buyer pays for the appraisal. There are some types of homes like HUD homes where you have to, if you're the buyer, you have to pay for the appraisal.
Well, and it's always negotiated.
It is.
Right now, and I think the seller paid appraisal was kind of still based back on trends years ago when people were, had to sell. They, just like the probate question, I got to sell and I want to sell now, I want to get out of here. So they were willing to give more concessions, as we call them, than they are now. Now we're seeing it more on a case-by-case basis, but it's not mandated that the seller pay for it, it's negotiated.
Well, and in the last 5 years, I have seen more cash transactions than I have in a 30-year career. There's a
Yes.
lot of people with cash, and if you pay cash, you don't have to have an appraisal.
Not necessarily.
So if you're out doing your homework and you've gone out and you've looked at 10 homes and this is the nicest for the least amount of money, you probably can feel comfortable buying it without an appraisal. So I think we've answered Penny's questions.
Well, we need it for loan types.
She wants to know why it can't be paid at closing. Now, a lot of lenders are requiring that the appraisal be paid for before closing.
And that's on a case-by-case basis too. You can do where, and part of that has to do with the appraiser, because the appraiser is a independent third party. If the appraiser will allow it to be paid through closing, that's fine. Now, where this practice starts, so years and years ago, it was just it was industry standard to get paid at closing because everything closed.
Right.
Then when the market changed and homes weren't appraised for
They didn't close.
and then all of a sudden, so you've got an appraiser who's gone out and provided a service and needs to be paid. And if they didn't secure a form of payment, it was awful hard to get payment after the fact. People didn't want to pay for an appraisal on a deal that didn't close regardless of who agreed to.
And the lender, if he's not going to be making the loan, even though the appraisal was for the lender, he doesn't want to pay either. So
Right. Somebody has to pay the appraiser for their services. So that's really where that practice came. But you will see it on occasion where you can go in and say, hey, you know what? We know this is a pretty good deal. It's going to happen. And what I've seen with companies I've worked for, they'll say, all right, if it doesn't close, as the loan officer, you're on the hook for the cost of the appraisal. And you don't want to be in that position.
And I think for safety's sakes, a lot of lenders will ask for like a credit card, but they won't use it. They'll go ahead and have it be paid at closing. It would be the worst case scenario that they would charge
hold
it
that
against
as a
it.
backup funding source for that appraisal. And like I said, sometimes it depends on the appraiser. Some of the appraisal management companies want to be paid up front, and others will be fine with taking it through closing.
And I think, well, like the one I was just telling you about that really happened to me, the person who bought the house, they paid cash. They bought the house for mom and dad to live in, paid cash. They decided when mom and dad weren't living there to sell it. So they hired their realtor. The realtor came over, did a comparative market analysis, showed them what all the other homes in the area with similar square feet, bedrooms, bathrooms, garage were selling, showed what the competition was. And he thought, well, if I put it here at the bottom, that's a pretty fair price. Yep, it is a fair price. Well, why do I need an appraisal? So it does happen. I guess the answer is it's negotiable.
Yep, I would agree.
So Penny,
Great question, though.
good question, but I think we've answered all the different parts of your question. The next one comes in from Jesse. You want to take that one?
Absolutely. So Jesse writes and he said, how valid are the reviews agents and lenders get from past clients? I have never given a review unless I was really upset and probably wouldn't give one unless asked. Some sites do and some don't. Do you ask past clients to play you up?
You know, you're more on the social media than I am. Do you ask for referrals? I mean, testimonials?
You know,
In the
I've been,
past,
I've
you
been,
know-
I've been asked to. It's just not necessarily in my nature.
I've been told by the people in Idaho Open Media that it was common practice when the internet was just getting started and people had web pages. People just make up testimonials and put them on there.
And I believe that.
And so you couldn't believe the testimonials. But now we have things like for the contractors, what is that? Angie's List.
Right.
You know, and they actually vet those people out to make sure that they are serious testimonials.
Well, and a lot of people vet you through social media sites like LinkedIn if they're looking for a professional. You can go on there and see who's looking at you. So I know every week I get an update and I can see who's been looking at my profile. And usually it's somebody who I may be doing business with or are thinking about doing business with me. But as far as asking for reviews, that's just not in my nature. But I have had clients who say, if you ever need a referral, you ever have somebody, they can always give me a call. You know, so I agree. I said the unfortunate thing I would say, Jesse, is in your question, you said you've never given a review unless you were really upset. But what if you're really happy? If somebody really worked hard and provided you great service and gave you everything you need, if you're inclined to give a review, I think you should give good ones as well as bad ones.
All right. I think you have to be really careful to make sure that they are vetted testimonials, not somebody just making up something and putting it on the page or asking a bunch of friends to pose as past clients and say nice things about you. I do know that some of the sites like Realtor.com are, you have to give the person's name and their email address, and they send an email asking what your relationship is. They kind of vet the situation to make sure that they're legitimate.
And
But
they
I'm not
should
sure
validate
that's
that.
across the board.
Probably not.
And but you know, sometimes now I'm a little more cognizant. If I'm at closing, people say, hey, "You did a great job. What can I do for you?" I'll say, you know, if you get a request for a testimonial on how I did, I'd appreciate it. So I think we're all getting a little bit more conscious of that.
Right.
So, but I don't think you can. I don't think we're at a point where you can base. Am I going to use that agent? Am I going to use that lender based on the testimonials that you see? I think there's still a little bit beware.
Hopefully
there.
there's some real human interaction there that takes place.
And you know, with the videos, we talked about that's why these videos are getting to be so well received, because they're finding that instead of like just reading a testimonial about somebody, if you click and you see that person, you identify with them and you can empathize with them and you can, you know, there's this interaction that kind of takes place. You kind of know when people are being honest with you, if they're going the extra mile, if they're fluent in what they're talking about.
Helps you connect.
And that's why these videos, I think, are going to be real important, because it's more than just reading. You actually get to see the person, see what he looks like.
Right.
So I think that's good too. The next one is from Lee, isn't it?
Yep.
Lee says, I have been told that some people won't sell to veterans. There was a condo that I liked, and my agent said that I couldn't use my VA loan. And on another property, my agent said the sales price was higher if I used my VA entitlement. Isn't this discrimination? I have been asked if I'm disabled as well. Lee, I don't really think you're being discriminated against. A good agent, if you were interested in buying a condo, would check to see how many of those condos were rented. Because both VA and FHA, if there's more renters there than homeowners, then they won't let you get a VA or FHA loan. So that may not have been discrimination. It just may have been the one condo unit you liked. There had too many renters living
Yep.
there. The next question he had, about wanting
Disability.
more money.
Oh,
And you know, a lot of times people will price things like a cash price. And sometimes veterans, the seller is required to pay a few costs that aren't negotiable. Now, what are those costs? Doc prep,
so
I
yeah,
think.
you've got your non-negotiables. I mean, you're limited on origination fee.
The seller has to pay for the appraisal, don't they, on a VA?
Yes.
And they have to pay for the doc prep,
Yeah, or
tax
what-
service.
You know, and that's the funny thing too, because all lenders charge differently. Like where I'm at now, we charge one flat fee for everything. So our underwriting, processing, duct drawing, flood cert, tax prep, everything is all included in that one fee. So on a VA loan,
It doesn't make any
it
difference.
doesn't really make any difference. But you know, and you'll see that a lot with new construction. If VA price, you know, add $1,000
Right.
for all the additional seller incurred fees. So, you know, it's just kind of the way they
And,
do this.
and really, Lee, it's normally just on new construction that I see add for VA, because there's extra cost to the builder if you go VA.
Right.
But to me, I think of it as more of like, if you want a covered patio, it's an extra. You want a skylight, it's an extra. If you want the contractor to pay some of your closing costs, it's an extra. Everything's an extra on new construction, and they're not discriminating.
Well, and the last part, you know, Lee, could be one of the reasons they're asking you if you're disabled or not, because when you're a veteran
We have a lot of disabled vets
Yep.
coming back.
and you have a disability rating, if you reach a certain disability rating, your VA funding fee can be waived and
Sure.
you're exempt from it.
And so they're just trying to save you money.
Yeah, that's a question. If you have that disability rating and it's documented, it can actually save you a lot of money.
And I know I ask everyone if they're a veteran, because it's a great loan product if you're a veteran. But now that, you know, I'm one of the brokers for the Idaho Homes for Heroes,
Right?
if they're a veteran, they're going to get a cash gift back from me, the seller, maybe the lender, for serving our country.
Right.
So if I don't know, then that's just money they're not going to get.
Yeah, and that's really a question that's asked on your behalf. It's not to qualify you in or out. It's actually asked on your behalf to determine if you may be eligible to have your funding fee exempted.
Exactly. So I think people are trying to help you, Lee. I really don't think they're discriminating in any way, shape, or form. The next one comes from Amy. Amy says, can I use publicly traded stock for down payment to buy a house? If I sell the stock, I pay a broker fee and capital gains tax. I was told that I could have my broker issue the shares directly to me and I could endorse them over to a new owner. He said, just don't lose them. And I've heard that if you own stock in a company, instead of having your stock broker hold your shares of stock with all the other shares of stock, you can actually have the company send the shares of stock with your name.
Directly.
And if you want to transfer them, you sign your name on the back. A lot of times there's a fee that you have to pay to the secretary of the corporation to change the names on the stock certificates. That's why most people don't carry the certificates with them. And then there's always the danger of being lost or caught in a fire or something like that. But they're negotiable. I mean, why can they use them as a down payment?
Not on any type of standard lending product. If you're doing private party and you've got a seller who's willing to take those in consideration for down payment, that's fine. But if you were to go out and use that to try to buy a home and get financing, you're not going to be able to do it because
She's going to have to sell it, get the money, pay the capital gains tax.
you're going to have
take
to
cash at
liquidate
closing.
because stock values vary. So they go up, they go down. They're not a liquid asset. So from an equity standpoint, that's a variable. So you can't use that. So if you want to go out and get a conventional loan, you couldn't. You say, hey, I'm going to put $40 on $200,000 home. Let's say you want to avoid mortgage insurance, so you want your 20% down. You can't take, in essence, what's $40,000 of stock certificates and turn those in as down payment funds. You'd actually need to liquidate those funds and come in with cash.
Yeah, you have to be awful creative then to use them on regular transactions. Your best bet, and Amy, would be on an ownerable carry situation where you'd say, here's the stock, you can look in the paper today, it's worth this much money, that's my down payment. have them carry the paper, get the property in your name, and then go back in and refinance it down the road, something like
There you
that,
go.
to make a real short balloon, like it comes due in a few months or something.
I hope that stock performs well. So, our next question comes from Neil. Neil writes and said, I read that people who are upside down on their home can bankrupt a portion of the debt and still keep the house. How does that work?
Well, Neil, don't get in such a hurry to bankrupt. I mean, home prices are going up. I mean, I've seen some homes that were so underwater that I never thought that they would see the light of day, that are seeing the light of day, and the values have come back and people are getting their money out of them, and bankruptcy is going to affect you for several years down the road negatively. But what about, can you bankrupt, are some of the loans bankruptable?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I agree with what you said earlier, Neil. You know, for the most part, unless there's something really adverse about your property or where you're living, for the most part, we've seen almost a complete recovery and values have come back to pre-bubble levels. Matter of fact, in some areas, even here locally, we're almost tipping over where we were.
In some neighborhoods and things,
Yep.
Jeff.
So it is somewhat relative. But, you know, depending, I guess, when you say bankrupt a portion of your debt. So let's say if you've got a first mortgage and that's all you have, you don't have a home equity line, you don't have a second mortgage or anything else attached, you can't bankrupt a portion of it. It's an all or none.
Yeah, they're going to take the property back, and if they can't sell it, and if for some reason they wanted to go after you for a deficiency judgment, which means I took the house back, I couldn't sell it for enough to pay off the loan, so I'm going to go after your other assets, then you could probably bankrupt that judgment.
Right.
I think if you were talking about first loans, if they had a first and a second,
Right.
and it was like a home remodeling type loan,
Home
or
equity, home improvement.
maybe a loan that you got to put siding on the house, something like that, you could probably put that into bankruptcy, because they would have to go ahead and not only foreclose on the house, but they'd have to take care of the first. And very few junior lenders are going to want to take on the financial responsibility of making a first mortgage payment.
Well, and if in this case, that example, if you've got a first mortgage and you're paying it on time, they're not going to let it go.
Right.
You know, even though the second is on, that's always the risk with a second or a third or whatever lien position other than first. They always subordinate to the first, and the first really dictates what's going to happen. And if you can't get them on board, and same situation, if you were financing a home and you owned a first mortgage and they were paying on time every month, you're not as concerned with the other stuff because you're getting paid and you're performing.
Well, and like on short sales
Yeah.
and modifications, if you're current, they're not going to want to work with you. But, you know, we saw this in short sales,
Right.
where you would work with the bank to take less because you were upside down, but maybe you had a second, third on the property. The first would say, well, you can give them $1,000. It was typical to satisfy them, but no more, because I want all my money, because
Pay
they're
me
going to be
first.
sucking air
Yep.
if I take the house back anyway.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and I think really, Neil, before you consider bankruptcy, I don't know where you live or where this comes from. Get a value on your home. Get a current valuation. So I would hate for you to make a rash decision that's going to have, you know, severe economic consequences and affect your credit for several years. You know, because maybe you're not fully aware of where your house is.
yeah,
at.
and you might just be underwater because of the first, second, third. If you did bankrupt the second and third, then you could keep the house intact with the first, and
Right.
maybe not be upside down
Yep.
anymore. So I see maybe where Neil's coming from. The last question, and we've got about 3 minutes left. I think we're doing great.
We're doing good.
The last question is from Randy. You want to take it?
Sure. So Randy writes and said, I was told that if I had 3%, I could buy a house, but what they did not tell me is all the closing costs can add up to that much or more. What loans do not have closing costs? Can all these extra charges be tacked onto the loan? Great
Well,
question.
Yeah, Randy, you know, closing costs is a great big umbrella that includes finance charges, lender charges, prepaid items.
Well, all your title and escrow, all the legal,
All of that
the
sort of
legal
thing,
things that
right.
have to happen to transfer that
And,
property
you know,
into your name.
I'm sorry you found out kind of late in the game that closing costs can be as much as a down payment, sometimes more.
Shouldn't really be more than 3% though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
should be. Also, points is figured as a closing cost, and closing costs allow you to get a lower interest rate, but it's certainly going to, you know, up the closing costs. But if you're going to get financing, you're going to have more closing costs than if you pay cash. If you put a small down payment versus 20% or more down, you'll have more costs.
Yep.
Those are kind of the basics I'm kind of coming up with. There are some provisions. We talked about this during the break. You can have the lender, because rates are super low right now.
They are.
And you could actually still get a great rate,
And premium
but it's
price.
higher than the going rate.
To offset your
And then
closing
have
costs.
the lender pay a lot of the closing
Well,
costs.
that's kind of goes to his last point there about can they be tacked onto the loan. There are ways to add those in there through what we call premium pricing or a little bit higher interest rate to offset those closing costs.
But I'll tell you, Randy, if I was to go back and look at the last 100 transactions that I've been the real estate broker for, I would say 100% of them, the seller paid all or part of the closing. I mean, you do a lot of my loans.
Sure.
And so, Randy, maybe besides not telling you about closing costs, maybe no one told you can have an exclusive buyer broker working for you and get some of these closing costs, at least ask the seller to pay some of the closing
Sure.
costs. I had one this past week that the buyer and seller couldn't come together on one of the closing costs. And I thought it was just so silly. I says, are you going to let this deal fall for a few $100s? I asked the listing agent, I says, will you pay it? And they did.
Sure.
So, Randy, yes, there are closing costs. If you're only going to put 3% down, you're probably going to pay the maximum because you're also going to have private mortgage insurance because that's going to be huge. You need to have someone asking the seller, hey, I've only got 3%. If you want your home sold, will you pay my closing costs? And then another thing too is don't be afraid to say, okay, I love the house. I don't have closing costs. Raise the price. We're in a market right
There we
now
go.
where the market is going up like this. Offer a little bit more if the seller will pay the closing costs because the market value by the time the appraiser goes out, it might be up there.
Yep.
Seller still gets what they want but has enough extra to pay your closing costs.
I've got one that we're doing right now, that exact same situation, because the market has changed. It is becoming a seller's market.
You think so?
I do.
Okay.
I'm just seeing with the days on the market, the lack of inventory. And so I'm seeing where, you know what, I've only got this much down. So let's increase the purchase price by, 2% to cover your closing costs,
Right.
2.5%. Another thing too is, Randy, obviously depending on your situation, there are still some 100% financing options out there. I mean, you have to have 0.5% of your own money into it, which is usually your earnest money. But there's a lot of ways. That's why you need somebody who knows how to negotiate.
Well, and sometimes in this big umbrella of closing costs, one of the items that gets thrown in there is prepaid items.
Yep.
Now, prepaid items really isn't a cost. It's part of your house payment that they're collecting in advance. So they're collecting some of your property tax, some of your homeowner's insurance up front. That's your money. You're
Right.
going to get to use it down the road, but they want to go ahead and stick it in a special escrow account so they have everything when the fire insurance comes due and the taxes comes due. So it's not really an expense, but it is a closing cost that you're going to have to figure in to buy a home.
And the other side of that too, and I see this all too often, is nobody takes into account is the tax credit you get from the seller because we pay our property taxes in arrears here. So when you go to sell a home, if you're the seller, we pay 6 months in arrears. So you're going to give a credit to the buyer of that home for those property taxes that you owe. And that offsets your closing
Yeah,
costs.
sometimes, Randy, in the process of doing the prorations at the closing, the seller will end up paying something that you'll get credit for that might lower what you have to come in with. So I think we answered all of the questions. I would like to thank all of our listeners that take the time to go to www.propertylinetoday.net, send in your questions, or took time during the show to call us at 830-2557. And so we have these questions to answer. And Paul, thanks for coming in and being my co-host. It's kind of makes me feel like when we were on the radio together all those years.
It's like going home again. Great stuff today.
And for years and years and years, I've ended every show by saying, until next week, folks, keep your feet on the ground, but keep reaching for the stars. And may God bless each and every one of you. Bye now.